Smallpox was once the world's most alarming threat, gripping entire civilizations in its relentless hold. It wasn't just a passing illness. For centuries, it shaped cultures, changed the course of history, and tested humanity's determination to survive. Today, we barely hear about it. Yet, behind its disappearance lies one of the greatest triumphs in modern health. So settle in, because we're about to unravel every layer of this monumental story, from its shadowy origins to the remarkable journey that banished it from our daily worries. We begin by stepping into an era where knowledge of viruses was non-existent, and the concept of germs had not yet formed. Smallpox, or variola, as it's scientifically known, is believed to have been present for thousands of years. Traces of it can be seen in ancient Egyptian mummies, with pockmark-like scars hinting at a disease that lurked in our earliest civilizations. The disease operated in the shadows, weaving itself into the tapestry of societies that had no way to understand or name it. Thousands of years ago, communities associated such sweeping sickness with the displeasure of higher powers or curses cast by mysterious forces. Ancient medical practitioners tried everything they knew: herbal remedies, prayers, and intricate rituals in the hope that the affliction could be chased away. Early attempts at quarantine were haphazard and often cruel, reflecting the collective panic that grew when outbreaks surged. Entire families were torn apart by the fear that the affliction would spread uncontrollably. But the real destructive power of smallpox wasn't just physical suffering. It left behind deep cultural and psychological wounds. In many societies, survivors lived with permanent marks etched into their skin, serving as daily reminders of the calamity they had faced. Some survivors even gained a degree of respect, regarded almost as toughened individuals who had emerged from a frightening passage. Others, however, were singled out and seen as carrying an unexplainable stigma, creating a divide that shaped social structures. As centuries rolled by, smallpox never truly vanished, popping up in waves that left unimaginable chaos in its wake. It altered warfare, trade, and migration routes. Merchants feared carrying more than just goods along trade roads, often blaming foreign lands for what they believed were unstoppable curses. The spread of smallpox ran parallel to the expansion of empires, traveling in caravans and ships, quietly infiltrating remote corners of the globe. By the time major kingdoms and trading powers noticed its pattern, it was too late. Smallpox had woven itself into the very soul of human civilization. The earliest references in textual records depict a sickness that was intense and unforgiving, especially among those with no prior exposure. Political leaders, mystical healers, and physicians alike stood united in confusion. But the seeds of curiosity and determination were planted as these societies grappled with the repeated crises that smallpox unleashed. When we fast forward to a time when scientific exploration began to blossom, smallpox stood as a central puzzle. It was, in today's terms, a highly contagious viral illness caused by the variola virus, though early scholars had no concept of viruses as distinct entities. Unlike some illnesses that required the bite of an insect or contaminated food to spread, smallpox thrived in direct human-to-human contact. Close interaction, like living in cramped family dwellings, huddling together during colder seasons, or gathering in market squares, allowed it to jump from one host to another. Contaminated clothing and bedding were also notorious vectors. During the intense symptomatic phase, individuals showed high fever, aches, and eventually a blister-like rash that covered much of the body. These lesions formed pus-filled bumps, which then crusted over. In the thick of outbreaks, families caring for an afflicted member inadvertently exposed themselves to the virus. There were no effective gloves, masks, or sanitizers, only guesswork and rudimentary attempts at isolation. Children, especially, were vulnerable. In many societies, smallpox was considered a childhood illness because those who made it through early exposure were less likely to suffer from it again, albeit they carried physical scars. But in populations with no prior exposure, entire regions that had yet to encounter the virus, the toll was profound. It took centuries for humanity to realize just how meticulously smallpox latched onto social structures. It often surfaced in warmer months, when marketplaces were buzzing and festivals brought people together in large gatherings. Entire villages or cities could be overwhelmed in a matter of weeks, triggering an atmosphere of dread that lingered for generations. Ironically, the very sense of community that bonded people together became a way for the virus to flourish. Only with the advent of microscopes and breakthroughs in biology did researchers finally identify the agent responsible. The revelation that it was transmitted via droplets and contact marked a pivotal shift in strategy. Knowledge sparked the earliest glimmers of modern epidemiology as we started identifying methods to minimize infection. Things like improved hygiene, isolation wards, and better protective measures. Smallpox left a deep footprint on every continent it touched, although certain events stand out in stark relief. For instance, during the colonization of the Americas, the arrival of smallpox had an overwhelming impact on the indigenous populations. Entire societies that had never encountered the virus were exposed to it for the first time, resulting in tragic and abrupt transformations that reshaped cultural landscapes. In many parts of the world, smallpox outbreaks influenced political decisions. Wars paused because armies were drained by infection, or military campaigns collapsed altogether when soldiers were weakened. Rulers worried about passing this illness to potential heirs, throwing successions and dynastic futures into uncertainty. Art and literature also bore the mark of smallpox. Medieval paintings occasionally depicted figures covered in blemishes, symbolizing despair or divine punishment. In diaries and letters, references to the pox abounded, capturing a fear so universal it cut across class and status. The survivors could be identified by the distinctive scars on their faces, a silent symbol of both their encounter with the virus and their ability to pull through. As global travel and exploration ramped up, smallpox effectively became an uninvited traveler, hitching a ride on ships carrying goods and explorers to distant shores. Diplomatic missions of peace and trade unwittingly introduced the virus to new hosts. This was further complicated by the fact that certain governments at different points in history either underestimated the seriousness of smallpox or deployed it as a tool of intimidation, creating heated debates about the ethics of biological warfare, even though it was not fully understood as biological warfare at the time. Religious institutions, seeing the horrifying outcomes, organized communal prayers and sometimes enforced strict measures against gatherings. The spiritual dimension of smallpox ran deep. In certain cultures, it was personified as a deity or a spirit to be appeased. From Africa to Asia, offerings, dances, and ceremonies were performed in the belief that these gestures might protect communities from the sickness. Through time, smallpox became woven into mythologies and folk tales. Histories that once seemed hyperbolic, stories of entire villages struck down in mere weeks, turned out to be accurate reflections of just how disruptive the disease could be. It left behind not just a physical toll, but a far-reaching cultural imprint that shaped art, religious practice, governance, and interpersonal relationships. One of the most fascinating chapters in the history of smallpox is humanity's determined quest to subdue it. Before sophisticated science came into play, there were early forms of what we'd now recognize as immunization. Practices like variolation in China and parts of Africa involved taking material from a recovering individual's lesion and introducing it into a healthy person's system, usually through the nostril or a small scratch, hoping to trigger milder symptoms that would grant protection. It was risky, but in places where smallpox was rampant, it offered a glimmer of hope. The turning point arrived in the late 18th century with Edward Jenner's pioneering work. Observing that dairy workers who had experienced a milder disease called cowpox appeared shielded from smallpox, Jenner hypothesized that exposing people to cowpox could provide the same protective benefit without the risks of variolation. This method, eventually termed vaccination, brought a new era to medical science. However, persuading the public and the medical community was a challenge. Early adopters faced skepticism and conspiracy theories. Some people objected on religious grounds, while others were concerned about side effects. As more regions slowly accepted vaccination, smallpox cases began to decline. Over time, governments worldwide recognized the huge benefits of widespread immunization. Laws were introduced in various countries to encourage, or sometimes mandate, vaccination. Still, the virus remained entrenched in areas where healthcare was scarce, where political conflict hindered medical campaigns, or where cultural beliefs proved resistant to unfamiliar practices. The 20th century kicked off a massive global effort, culminating in the World Health Organization's WHO intensified drive in the 1960s and 1970s. Health workers crossed deserts, jungles, and remote mountainous regions to identify cases and vaccinate exposed communities. Stories of heroic feats abound. Doctors camping for weeks in villages that had never seen outsiders, nurses carrying vaccine vials on foot across miles of rugged terrain. Slowly but surely, the incidence of smallpox dropped. Finally, in 1980, the WHO made a groundbreaking announcement. Smallpox had been eradicated globally. The unwavering dedication of countless individuals culminated in a monumental achievement. It was the first time humankind had fully pushed a major pathogen out of existence in natural circulation. What followed was a new confidence. If we could unite against a disease as formidable as smallpox, what else might we accomplish? Decades after that official announcement, smallpox remains an important chapter in public health. Laboratory samples of the virus are stored in highly secure facilities, fueling debates about whether they should be destroyed or preserved for research. On the one hand, there's the fear of reintroducing a vanished scourge. On the other, there's the scientific argument that studying the virus could help prevent a possible reemergence or create new therapies for similar diseases. The story of smallpox also serves as a masterclass in how misinformation can spread in times of crisis. Historically, rumors about the disease's origin or the dangers of vaccination circulated quickly. Even with modern-day connectivity, or perhaps because of it, such patterns persist when new public health challenges arise. Smallpox reminds us to stay vigilant about credible science, effective communication, and well-coordinated policy. Furthermore, the global campaign against smallpox provided invaluable lessons about vaccination logistics, community engagement, and international collaboration. These lessons have shaped responses to outbreaks of other illnesses, such as polio, and more recent pandemics. Techniques like ring vaccination, where close contacts of an infected individual are specifically immunized to contain the spread, originated from smallpox eradication strategies. But perhaps the most important legacy is the hope it provides. Even when faced with formidable obstacles, isolated populations, limited resources, lack of infrastructure, human ingenuity prevailed. We developed processes for storing and delivering vaccines across different climates. We learned to train local health workers, bridging cultural divides, and building trust in remote settings. We refined surveillance methods, ensuring rapid detection and containment of cases. Today, smallpox's presence has faded from daily life, but its echoes remain. It stands as a testament to what's possible when we unite for a common goal. Its memory challenges us to keep investing in global health, to remain vigilant about new threats, and to never forget that perseverance and collective will can steer the course of history. From its mysterious beginnings in distant civilizations to its eventual downfall in modern times, smallpox demanded a level of global unity that was unprecedented. Beyond the stark images of pockmarked survivors, beyond the countless stories of heartbreak and resilience, smallpox taught us how important it is to stay united in the face of crises. It pushed us to question long-held beliefs, to innovate, and ultimately to succeed at what once felt impossible. Its story stands at the crossroads of history, medicine, and human compassion, reminding us that even the darkest challenges can inspire a brighter, healthier future for everyone. Thanks for joining this deep exploration of one of humanity's most formidable adversaries. If you found this journey enlightening, remember to tap that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more eye-opening content. Your support fuels our ongoing mission to bring fascinating stories and vital knowledge directly to you.